history sometimes changes course on the edge of a single order. Today, the calm waters of the Persian Gulf are groaning under the weight of one of the largest military buildups ever seen. What President Trump has called the Magnificent Armada is not merely a naval task force, it is Washington's final and most powerful card on the table against Tehran. But this time the adversary bears no resemblance to Venezuela or to past regional conflicts. Today we face a cornered regional power with thousands of missiles pointed toward the sea, and a superpower determined to force it to its knees. If diplomacy slips from that razor-thin line, the shadow cast by these enormous steel masses could trigger a war that plunges the entire world into darkness. We are now entering the backstage of the great reckoning that no one dares speak about aloud, yet everyone is watching with bated breath, straight into the very heart of the storm. The enormous military buildup we are witnessing right now is, in fact, the final stage of a strategy that has been meticulously woven for months. The Trump administration has elevated its maximum pressure doctrine to a fully military dimension in order to force Iran into a new nuclear deal. This deployment is not merely a show of force, it is a deliberate siege operation designed to choke Tehran's windpipe. Operational data clearly indicates that this force was not sent to the region solely for defensive purposes. On the contrary, it represents surgical preparation by an invisible hand, capable of reaching even the deepest, most buried Iranian facilities. Yet on this chessboard, the opponent is far from helpless. Iran appears to have learned hard lessons from the short but intense clashes in June. Thousands of short and medium-range missiles are now positioned to target U.S. bases and allied assets across the region. Washington is effectively playing a high-stakes gamble with this. Colossal Armada, my power is sufficient to neutralize your missiles, but your power is not sufficient to escape my wrath. If that psychological red line is crossed, a single spark in the Strait of Hormuz will be enough to blow the global energy market sky high. The war is not being fought only at sea, it is also being waged in the cold salons of the region's capitals. The stance now being taken by Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates and Jordan, countries normally regarded as allies, is stark evidence of just how dangerous this crisis has become. By refusing to allow their territories to be used as attack bases, these nations are in fact trying to shield themselves from the risk of a full-scale regional conflagration. Yet this quiet resistance does not paralyze U.S. operational capability, on the contrary, it is forcing the operation to become even more independent, conducted almost entirely from the sea and from the air, with no reliance on regional staging grounds. Real-time data streaming from surveillance systems confirms that every single Iranian move, every missile launcher position, is being tracked second by second. This is history's most transparent war, and at the same time its most covert. On one side, technology that takes off thousands of kilometers away, from the very heart of America, and locks onto its target. On the other, a resistance hub trying to exploit the advantages of geography and asymmetric warfare. The reality is that the balance in the region now hangs by a thread, and only time will reveal who will be the one to snap it. The effects of this crisis will not remain confined to the Middle East. Trump's move is being studied with extreme care in every capital from Beijing to Moscow. If the United States succeeds in forcing Iran back to the negotiating table through this military pressure, it will mark the beginning of an entirely new era in the global balance of power. However, any failure, or any conflict that spirals out of control, would mean oil prices going completely haywire and the global economy sliding into a major recession. The operational costs and the sheer scale of the defense systems being shifted to the region are clear proof of how seriously Washington is taking this matter. This is neither an election year investment nor a simple display of strength. It is America's determined effort to re-establish and recertify its presence and credibility in the Middle East. The cost of war is enormous. But according to the Trump administration, the cost of yielding is far greater. In conclusion, this colossal steel armada in the Gulf will either become the architect of a new peace or light the fuse for the greatest destruction of the century. Since Trump's Armada appeared on the horizon, the diplomatic table has never been shaken this violently. What we are witnessing today is the highest stakes gamble in modern history. On one side, absolute technological supremacy. On the other, geographical and ideological resilience. No matter who emerges as the winner of this crisis, the Middle East will never be the same again. The course being charted by USS Abraham Lincoln and the forces accompanying her is, in reality, also charting the course of our own future. Here we are not merely analyzing a military operation, we are analyzing the transformation of an entire world. Stay with us to keep hearing the truth and to continue seeing the bigger picture behind the events. Because in this war, the victor will not be the side with the stronger weapons alone. The primary benefit of this operation for the United States is to extend the maximum pressure doctrine beyond economic sanctions and transform it into a full military encirclement. With this immense firepower, Washington aims to shatter the psychological threshold in Tehran and force Iran to make concessions on both its nuclear program and its regional influence. However, Iran is not the sole target of the operation. Through this display of force, the United States is also reaffirming to its regional allies, Israel, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, the message, "We are here, and we guarantee your protection." This serves a critical strategic purpose, countering the growing influence of Russia and China in the Middle East and reinforcing the image of the United States as the sole credible security provider in the region. By securing absolute control over the energy corridors, Washington gains an invaluable lever of power in the global oil markets. In the coming period, three main scenarios for the evolution of the crisis are currently under consideration: controlled tension and a new agreement. The most optimistic scenario is that this massive military pressure will pull the Iranian leadership toward a rational negotiating position. Washington could leverage the presence of the Armada as a bargaining chip to bring a broader agreement to the table, one that also encompasses Iran's ballistic missile program. In this process, the military buildup could be gradually scaled back, while a permanent American presence in the region becomes institutionalized under a new security architecture. Asymmetric attrition and shadow war. It is highly likely that Iran will avoid direct confrontation and instead rely on proxy forces, Houthis, Hezbollah, various militia groups, to carry out low-intensity but persistent attacks against the United States and its allies. In this scenario, sabotage operations in the Strait of Hormuz, harassment by unmanned surface vessels, and cyber attacks would come to the fore. The strategic aim would be to waste the enormous American military power and drag the U.S. into a prolonged, costly war of attrition. miscalculation and regional war. Given the extreme tension in the region, a single spark, for example, an accidental collision between a UAV and an American destroyer, or a border violation, carries the risk of triggering an uncontrollable escalation. Should that happen, the operation could rapidly transform from surgical airstrikes into a large-scale campaign targeting Iran's entire military and industrial infrastructure. This scenario would mean not only a regional war but a war of the century, capable of shaking global supply chains and sending energy prices into chaos. These three pathways represent the primary forks in the road ahead, each with profound implications for the Middle East, global energy markets, and the broader balance of power. Time management is the weakest link in this operation. Maintaining a force of this magnitude in the region indefinitely is unsustainable, both in terms of logistical costs and the operational fatigue of personnel. In the coming weeks, Washington will likely face a stark choice: either convert this pressure into a concrete diplomatic outcome, or resort to limited kinetic action to preserve the credibility of its deterrence. In conclusion, the Steel Armada in the Gulf represents both a tremendous opportunity and an enormous risk for the United States. The ultimate benefit of the operation would be a diplomatic victory achieved without firing a single shot. However, the realities on the ground, combined with Iran's well-established doctrine of strategic patience, indicate that the process could very easily evolve into a far more complex and prolonged war of attrition. Washington's next move will not only define the future of the Middle East, it will also set the boundaries of the New World Order in the 21st century. We will continue to follow this critical process with military data and geopolitical analysis. Stay with us for the latest developments.